So DRX, Vision Strikers, they are on top again. And coming into the playoffs, they were your favourite. I saw you said, actually, I mean, you were probably joking, but you had them as like the team to win everything. Like, how good is DRX?
They're really fucking good. They've always been this team that when they, even from last year when they had that massive streak, like even if somebody pushed them close or took a game off them, because there was a period of time where we had like the weird, best of two system. If they had lost a series to somebody, like they came back and they were fierce. So that has kind of been the case for this squad the whole time that they've existed in the Valorant scene. And they started off this year looking incredible. They started going for map picks that they normally did not. So they're going for Ascent, which was typically one that they would want to avoid. They're going for Breeze a lot. So it was kind of showing this new look of DRX with the return of Zest as their IGL as well. And they were just looking really, really dominant. It wasn't until they got to Onslayers the first time in the round robin that they were tested. And I mean, they completely fucking failed the test. They were destroyed 0-2. I think it was 13-4 was like the one scoreline that they had on Icebox. It was not even close. But I knew going into the playoffs, like it's going to be the inevitable rematch of those two teams, both in the upper bracket final, then also in the grand final. It played out exactly that way. And I knew that DRX was going to prep for that so incredibly hard because they do not like to lose. They are a team that will absolutely grind and focus on bouncing back. And that's what they did. They did it in a more convincing way than I even anticipated. I thought that it could have been a 5-map series, or at least a 3-1, but they just wiped the fucking floor with Onslayers. They didn't even give them an opportunity to breathe. After they, bested them on Haven, it went into OT on the very first map. It seemed like that loss just cost Onslayers all of their energy, all of their focus, and it just fell apart from there. DRX just were unrelenting. They're not a team who's like, oh, let's have a little bit of showmanship. Let's make it look close or anything like that. Like, let's screw around for this round right here. Like, we'll do a rush out of nowhere.
Fan service or something.
They don't take those risks. They will just play concisely and focused until the very end. Like, they're just unforgiving. They're not merciful whatsoever.
Okay. So by the way, Gio, when that whole like Vision Strikers thing was going on last year, because if people don't remember that, it actually killed the whole narrative because they had this insane streak and then they didn't even bloody qualify to the Masters thing, did they? Because they got upset by the solo Perry team, which, as I said, they're now coaches. So what were you? Did you follow that team at all? Were you interested in that storyline? Was the return game a surprise for you?
Around the time that I started really getting into Valorant properly. So that was kind of the storyline I was introduced to, right? Like around the time of Masters 2, where it was like, oh, here's the team who've gone to Masters. By the way, there's this other like really sick team that should have. So I sort of came into that looking at it retrospectively. But I think still, like, regardless of the fact that I wasn't necessarily there, like during the period of Vision Strikers doing that, like I still could have an appreciation for what that actually was and how impressive that was. But I think the really interesting story that came from that for me was like, when it really got to the proper, like, meat and bones of like having real international competition, like it brings in this idea that you can be a really dominant force domestically, but like, how does that actually translate to an international stage? And then obviously Vision Strikers were actually there at Masters 3 when I was working the event, and did really well. But again, like it was constantly this sort of from between then and Champions, because in Champions, they didn't actually qualify out of their group. So that's sort of like, it's almost like a story of like resilience, I think, that, from my perspective of like how the Vision Strikers like timeline went over the course of 2021.
Sure. By the way, Achilleos, that team, the Vision Striker squad, obviously it's slightly different, only slightly from the squad now. Was that actually, like, for real, one where the turn gaming was better when they qualified through? Or do you actually think that was, like, sort of, like, Vision Strikers fucked up and they maybe could have done it more if they'd gone to that particular Masters?
No, I think that was Vision Strikers really fucking up. That was the really strange hiccup, and the only one that we've seen so far from their play overall, where it seemed like they didn't have a good read on the game. They've been a team that is very ingenuitive and they're very quick to adapt to new metas and whatnot, but they were showing a lot of resilience when it came down to shifting over to the predominant meta, which was, a lot of Viper. If you looked around at other parts of the world, they weren't running that. And instead of trying to pick up something new, they actually ended up reverting back to their old strategies, which was kind of like the flash and dash, just having that breach and jet. Whereas in the weeks prior, when they were still finding success, like RB was playing a lot more Raze.
Right.
And he was looking fantastic as a Raze. So they just completely reverted to their old setup, and they were not looking like they were willing to budge and show any kind of flexibility in their composition. They just kind of ran it into the ground. And NewTurn was like, well, we know exactly how you play this because you've been doing this for so very long. Like, they just understood exactly what Vision Strikers was going to be trying to do round over round, and then NewTurn just kind of counteracted it perfectly. I think it was very much Vision Strikers dropping the ball, refusing to innovate and kind of move with the times, or even just change up the playstyle of that comp. They didn't come up with anything new. So there was no real surprises, and NewTurn was just able to be the better team, at that time. And I think that NewTurn made a very respectable run that nobody at all anticipated from them in, getting a third place at that first Masters event.
Sure. Gio, is there any players on this team that you've seen that were interesting or they stood out in any way?
Yeah, I mean, the player who I was a really big fan of was always Stax because, like, his breach play was really fun. And actually, the thing I'm really excited about the upcoming Masters is now a lot of other teams in other regions, like NA and EU, are playing a lot more breach than they were towards the end of last year. And I want to see how those two things match up, and if Stax is still going to be spoken about as like the star breach player, even on the international stage, which he very much was, like, towards the end of last year, or if there are like other players from other regions that are going to kind of outshine him in a sense. Like, that's probably going to be something I'm really interested in, because I always thought that he was, he was always the player I was the most interested in on the team.
How would he compare to how would he compare to like the people who play his equivalent role in the West, Achilles? How good is this player supposed to be?
I mean, he's actually changed up his style a little bit more as of late. Like, he's playing a much more supportive style rather than an aggressive breach, which is kind of what we saw from him last year. But I mean, last year he was one of the best, just like IGLs and anchors for a team that I've ever seen. Like, he could just keep that team grounded, and if they did get pushed to the point of, he's the last man standing, or it's a 2v5 or something, Stax is typically good for 3 kills in that moment. You just need the other person who's alive with you to come up with 1 or 2 more, and then suddenly the round is won. His clutch factor is absolutely through the roof. And I think that actually right now, everybody on the team averages around like a 24 to 28% clutch rate or whatever. So whenever they are put into a position with the last member alive on the team, everybody on the roster has a 25
that seems very high
chance of closing out. Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous, but they also don't get put into those situations so much regionally.
Yes,
so
sure,
you take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
But I'd say last year, like, Stax was by far and away the best breach in the world. I would still say that, Koreans had a couple players who were individually the best at their particular role. Bunny being on Raze is one that I will argue till the end of time. Stax being on breach is another one that's right up there.
Bunny on Raze is like an icon.
Every time I'm watching Bunny, it feels like I'm just tripping on like LSD or some shit, because he's just doing wacky stuff, and I can't really wrap my brain around like what the hell he's doing and how he moves the way that he moves. But he just has that character nailed down pat. Hopefully he returns one day. But going back to your question, like, I would still put Stax up there right now in the upper echelons of breaches. Obviously, I need to see a little bit more with him going up against international teams to see if he still is that solidified number 1 spot in my head. Just because he has played a bit more of I was going to say laid back style, but that's not correct. But a little bit more of a disconnected style where he's not like charging in. He's playing a lot more supportive. He's making sure that he's enabling his teammates. And I think that's a big reason why we see DRX being so clean and so methodical, is because they're just focusing on set plays and making sure that everybody's empowering everybody else at a given time. No one's going off and just trying to kill like 3 or 4 people. Occasionally you'll have your rush player, whatever, RB goes with the sheriff and kills 3, and it's just like, okay, I don't know how that happened. But if you zoom out, it's because the utility setup from the rest of the team is really enabling him to get into that aggressive position, and then he's just hitting his shots.
Sure. Yeah, if people don't know, so what I thought we'll do is, it's going to be a bit obnoxious if it's just me and Gio asking questions about all the teams, so I'll spread it out. What we'll do is we'll do like a Korean related topic in between each team. That way we have a time to keep it like a nice comfy convo. So we'll stick on DRX for the moment. In DRX, if people don't know, Stax and RB were actually CSGO players. They played for the MVP PK team, which was the top Korean team for the last few years of the game. But the key thing is, if you know what I just said earlier about organizations, MVP is a classic example of a starter org that what they do is they get in every new game, they scout some talent, they usually have a couple of coaches from some other game, they get like an early good team, but spoiler, they always are the one that have to yield if the scene ever becomes big. So in CSGO, tells you what CSGO was, that it never got big in Korea, basically. It was still always like a niche game. So these players played for that team, but if people don't know, they weren't actually the best players. Like the Stax guy was pretty decent in the team, but the best player, if people don't know, was actually not even in Korea right now. It's Zeta, who obviously plays in VCT NA on Cloud9, right? That was actually the best Korean CSGO player. But they have a couple who were from CSGO, and the interesting detail about their team as well to me is they're actually a team where their coach, Termi, was also the coach of this MVP team in CSGO, and himself a 1.6 player, actually. And in fact, those players I referred to earlier, so the coaches also of the other rival teams, Damwon and Onslayers, they're also 1.6 players who are coaches. So the interesting detail is, even though as we get into the episode, people are probably going to be surprised to find out how small Valorant potentially is in Korea, and that it might not become a big game, it's not actually that much to worry about, though, because what I would say is this, is you're actually going to get an inversion of what happens in League of Legends. So in League of Legends, if you compare the regions NA and Korea, it's night and day. Korea's about 1,000 times better, and I'm not exaggerating and hyperbolizing with 1,000.
Yes.
But if you're the best NA team, you could actually at least have a chance. You could be a dark horse against a Korean team. So in the same sense, I expect whoever the best Korean team is to actually often be a potential dark horse for the Western events, but I don't think they'll be the best. And part of the reason I say why is because one of the things I noticed in CSGO that Koreans really struggled with is because they didn't have any ability to practice the Westerners, they developed their own internal meta, and their meta was often too different to the Western meta, unfortunately. So the difference is when you have people who were old school coaches who actually have experience of like how to transition what you do domestically to international, who even will have the connections, by the way, to sort of boot camps and stuff. That's actually how you get your top teams to be at a comparable level. You won't ever get the whole scene to be, because you have to essentially have all the Koreans just decide tomorrow they love Valorant, and spoiler, that doesn't look like it's going to happen at the moment. But to me, it's actually key in these games. You see it, and obviously even in NA and EU, like the coaching and the people with the people coming over from CSGO, at least in the early days, it's going to give you some help getting up to speed and figuring out FPS games, etc.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
I mean, having Solo and Perry both move into coaching roles, Glow stepping back last year, I think it's been really, really great in creating, a multi-team region, I suppose, since everyone always likes to say, oh, it's just one team. It's only Vision Strike. It's only DRX. It's the only good team that's out there for Korea. I mean, not the case. They're still definitely on top, but I take a look at Onslayers and, on their best day, which definitely was not what was shown in the final, like they absolutely can contend with just about anybody out there. Bazzi is one of the most incredible Jet players in the world right now. So if you get him and the rest of the team fired up, they can take series off of just about anybody. That's the thing with Valorant right now. It's like there is no clear winner. The two finalists from last year are not going to Masters. The winner of that first Masters from last year is not in attendance. Yes. Things are very much still in turmoil. It's going to take, I think, a very long while, if it ever happens, where you see team really start to become streaky, such as NIP, such as Astralis and whatnot in CS. I don't know if that will ever necessarily occur, just because there's a lot more going on with Valorant. There's more changes. There's new agents being added to the game and whatnot consistently. So it's really difficult to try and predict like if anybody really could have that level of dominance. But yeah, I mean, I think that the impact of Termi being there and then Glow shifting over, being a positional coach, has done wonders for DRX. Because Glow, I think he could still have. He was mega, mate.
I saw him in the early games. He looked good.
Yeah, he still has it for a guy who's 34 years old, which is really up there for FPS games, especially in Korea. But he just was like, okay, you know what? We have these players that we want to grab. They get Mako, they get Buzz, they take 2 Jet mains, they convert one to being a smoker. Buzz continues to play Jet for last year, and he just works with them as a positional coach, and it paid off extremely well. I think that like for a first year in a tactical FPS for Korea to do what they did last year, I think that that's somewhat satisfying. It would have been a lot better, obviously, if they had made it out of their groups and champions, if they had been able to take down Cloud9. I think it would have been a hell of a lot better. But I'm still proud of what the region said, because there's so many people, obviously. A lot of it's just shit talk and shit posting, but people saying like Koreans can't aim, they don't play FPS games,
yes.
blah, blah, blah.
There's a lot of stereotypes.
But again,
like that, yeah.
You go ahead, you point back at a player, you tell them like, this is what is possible when you have Koreans who are focused on FPS. You can't disregard them. You also can't disregard people who come from Overwatch. Like, those players know how to fucking aim, and if you disrespect them and you continue to ignore them, they are going to creep up on you and suddenly take over the game. I think that, you know, the Termi Glow combination has just been magical. I'm hoping for more from Jamin and Perry on the side of Onslayers. And unfortunately for Solo, I don't know what the fuck is going on with Dom and Kia. They just shat the bed in their series versus Holy Moly is the best way that I can put it. And now they've dropped a couple players from the roster. So it seems like Solo's saying like, okay, we need to retool all of this. And he's doing that. I can only hope that it works, because I know that Damwon has the potential to be a top 3. I thought they were going to be maybe the second best team in the region this year. They absolutely are in that upper echelon, and they can compete internationally. They just need to find out like what the fuck their identity is going into Stage 2.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.